West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Tonight, the FBI stepping up its investigation into death threats against election workers in Fulton County, Georgia, home to Atlanta. This is according to County Elections Director Richard Barron, who says he met with investigators seeking more information about threats to him like this. And I will warn you that what you're about to hear, just one of many threats that he got, is disturbing.
234 years ago, the founding Caucasian fathers of America gave us the Second Amendment. Time's running out, Richard. We're coming after you and every mother that stole this election with our Second Amendment. You will be served lead.
That was one of many, and the flood of threats came in after former President Trump singled out Barron at a rally in December and tried to tie him to a debunked conspiracy theory that election workers in his county pulled out suitcases full of pro-Biden ballots while observers were allegedly evacuated during a water pipe break in Atlanta.
If you just take the crime of what those Democrat workers were doing, and by the way, there was no water main break.
Okay, I want to go now to Richard Barron, the elections director in Fulton County, Georgia. And Richard, so let me just start with the meeting you recently had with the FBI as part of their investigation into the threats made against you and others in your office. What do you understand about the investigation at this point?
Well, I think what they're aiming to do is to look at all of the threats that were received for post-November all the way through this summer. I know that not only me, but other people on my staff have received threats all the way into the summer, and I know that's happened around the country as well.
So I want to talk about that. I mean, obviously, your tenure as Fulton County Elections Director has had controversy, right? You barely survived a vote to oust you by a bipartisan county board of commissioners. But no matter what you're dealing with there professionally, none of it excuses the threats you have received, like this one.
Right.
It's quite obvious to anybody with half a brain that there was a lot of fraud. I expected, actually I demand, since y'all work for us, that y'all do something. And if you don't, I guess, what is it, tar and feather? I don't know what we do these days. Is it firing squad? Is it hanging for treason? Ooh, boy, you better run. That's all I got to say.
I mean, how dangerous is it right now for you to even to do your job when you're getting calls like that?
Well, I think what you have to do is just focus on going to work every day and doing what you're supposed to do and try to ignore the distractions. I know that, listening to those calls now, it's a little bit easier to hear them now than it was in the thick of things between the November election and our January Senate runoff. And I think, a lot of my staff, that's predominantly black staff, and the N-word was flying around with impunity on calls that they received almost daily for a few months.
Talk to me about that, because you say your office is predominantly staffed by African Americans, and so literally what would happen? They would pick up the phone, and people would be saying these horrible racist things. And from my understanding, tell me, Richard, is that it went farther than that. I mean, people had people come into their houses.
Yeah, a lot of the calls dealt with motorcycle gangs on their way to our offices to shoot us all in our offices and seats. We also had a couple members of my staff were visited at home by people at night at their doorway. Another lady had her grandma visited because they thought she was there. Said they wanted to make a citizen's arrest and tried to push their way into her grandmother's house.
So, there must have been times when you were truly scared for your life, for your family.
Well, I think mostly I was more concerned with my staff because I think they're the ones that are in the trenches doing the work. With regard, it was easier for me to get police protection than some of the other staff because they may live outside of the county. And then it becomes more complicated to arrange for police protection. And my job requires me to live within Fulton County.
All right. Well, I appreciate your time, Richard. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So I want to go now to Ben Ginsberg. He's a Republican elections lawyer with nearly 4 decades of experience, and he just launched a legal defense network for elections officials like Richard Barron who have received these threats. So, Ben, you hear Richard Barron talk about the death threats he's received. I played a couple of them. There were, countless more where that came from. But he's talking about staff members in his office, right? Motorcycle gangs threatening to come shoot them all in their seats, showing up at their homes. How did hearing stories like this affect your decision to get involved?
Well, very much. I co-chaired a presidential commission a few years ago with Bob Bauer, who was President Obama's attorney. We got to know election officials on the state and local level. They do a tremendous job in calling balls and strikes in our elections. And you have to have people who call balls and strikes. So these attempts to intimidate those election officials, combined with a nationwide push that's been successful in a handful of states to criminalize the actions of election officials, takes a huge cost out of the democracy, out of our systems of elections, credibility in elections.
So obviously it's not just Richard Barron, as he made clear, but election officials from across this country have had the courage to speak out. I've spoken to several of them. They've talked about the threats that they get, right? Their families have gotten. Here are just a few.
We receive phone calls into our offices at the Board of Supervisors, our staff, saying that our families are going to be slaughtered.
It seemed apparent to us that they were basically casing our house, seeing what kind of security measures we had.
Calls to our offices reminding us that this is what the Second Amendment is for. People like us.
All of this motivated by Trump's big lie about the election. Now, Ben, I've talked to you through this entire election situation, right, over the past year. You've worked in elections for nearly 40 years. Have you ever seen anything like this?
No, never like this, never on such a large scale, never designed to really stop elections officials from doing what they need to do about the casting and counting of ballots. And that really goes to the peaceful transfer of power. So that these attacks on election officials, plus the laws being passed in the states, plus what happened on January 6th, means that it really is time to tell elections officials that they do have allies, that people do have their backs.
So obviously Governor Abbott, has signed the voting law in Texas. You write in an op-ed when you were talking about your new legal defense network that in just the past 3 months, several states across the country, I'm quoting you, have passed laws that impose criminal penalties like fines and jail time on election workers for, as you say, simply doing their jobs. 3 of these states, Texas, Florida, and Georgia, and Texas, as I said just yesterday, have empowered partisan poll watchers, right? That's an explicit part of that legislation. What effect is that going to have?
In the polling place, which is designed to let people cast their ballots peacefully, Weaponized poll watchers can cause, number one, disruption and intimidation to voters potentially, and number two, distract election officials from doing their job. The really surprising thing to me in all this is that Republicans who are passing these laws seem to have no recognition that this can be used against them as easily as they think they can use it against Democrats. So that's a bad situation across the board.
It is Thursday, the 9th of September of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, a little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life, indeed. Well, what a crisis we have on our hands right now. Looks like McMaster, Kellyanne Conway, and Sean Spicer are being kicked to the curb. How could that have happened? Well, you try to burrow in a bunch of nincompoops, I guess they're going to get kicked to the curb at some point, wouldn't they? Shouldn't it be expected? I love how Spicer is like daring Jen Psaki. Don't you dare go there, about his qualifications to be on this military advisory board. One should remember, Sean, it wasn't just like, quote, qualifications, but do you reflect the administration's values? And no, you don't. So shut up. And Kellyanne Conway, you can live in your alternate facts. The reality is that, you're a Axis Sally, so shut the F up. And McMaster, get out of here. Okay. See how easy that was? How easy was that? Now, I would like to see a little bit more effort in pushback on the Republicans. On everything, actually, but specifically this push to, this push is ongoing. It's been decades in the making. To delegitimize the Democratic Party as not sharing American values, not having American values. I think that what we need to do, and this may take some time, and we should have done it yesterday, a few decades ago when it started, but we didn't. Because we're nice. We think that if we use the same, quote, tactics, that we become them. No, sometimes you got to fight fire with fire. The Republican Party does not share the values of America. You know them by their actions. Their deeds. It's bad enough what their thoughts are, but look what the hell they have done. They do not share American values. They don't share the idea of due process and equality for all. They want their way or it's the highway. Boy, I got to tell you, if I was poet, philosopher, king, those cliches would probably be outlawed too. But since we're still here, without my enlightened benevolence, we're just going to continue using cliches because I like them. Anyway, the Republican Party needs to be delegitimized. It's not hard. I know people don't want to be told that they're Nazis. I know that people don't want to be told they're racist. I know that people don't want to be told they're idiots. But at some point, being nice sure as hell doesn't work. Especially when they look at that as a weakness, a capitulation. I hold in my hands peace in our time. You can all go to bed now. And that's what we've been doing with this Republican Party. Whenever they've made a transgression, we've gone out and we've stated that we have peace in our time. It can't happen here. Well, you know what? We do not have peace in our time. We have Nazis in our midst. And yes, indeed, it is happening here. So, I would like to have, for instance, the Portland Police Department. Maybe we start with their unions. Maybe they get their union charter yanked because they're a criminal organization run by mobsters. You can do it to the Teamsters. You can do it to the cop unions. We better start there. Of course, I guess we got to find some investigators who haven't been tainted by the fascist brush. We need a purge of Nazis from our government, high and low. If the dog catcher's a Nazi, they don't have a job in government. Is that being prejudiced? Is that being bigoted? Is that not giving due process and equal protection for all? Oh, they'll be adjudicated. But Nazis, by definition, are anti-democratic. Their only purpose is to destroy. That has no place in America. And we have laws to prevent that. Except right now they're being used against phantom ghosts like Antifa. When you have the fascists right out there shooting themselves in the leg on live video, blaming Antifa. Oh, it was Antifa that shot me in the leg. Oh, well, Antifa made me shoot myself in the leg because I wouldn't have been here if it wasn't for Antifa. Antifa is there because of you. Whatever Antifa is. Because what Antifa is are anti-fascists. Black Bloc out there, I don't know about them. There's too many agent provocateurs in Black Bloc to give them any credibility for any of their actions. But America is anti-fascist by definition. Fascists are anti-democratic by definition. And why the hell Steve Bannon doesn't reside in a brig? Why the hell there's not an Interpol red notice on his ass? I would like to know. Well, I'm being rhetorical, of course. You know that. Okay, well, you know what? Some of these rants have been going on for so long. Indeed, well, why don't we go ahead and tuck into what we are expecting here. Well, it's the curated part of the show, of course. It's the menu for today. It changes every day, according to the special of the day. Indeed, well, at the top, that was a harrowing story of the Georgia election official and his predominantly black staff receiving over 150 threats, death threats, even some by biker gangs in person at their homes, after Trump accused him of a crime at one of his hate rallies. What was that crime? See, this is terrorism. This is sending your brown shirt shock troops. This is putting the KKK out on their midnight ride on their hogs. What the hell? It's about time that we stood up to this. Look, if we can't get the lawmen to, enforce the law, we get rid of those lawmen, don't we? If Portland Police Department doesn't want to get vaccinated and they want to risk their 20-year pensions, go right ahead. We can get a new kind of cop on the beat. You know, one that walks a beat and isn't dressed up like a mutant ninja turtle mutant ninja, whatever it's called. Someone without all the accoutrements of a stormtrooper, RoboCop, paramilitary goon. Excuse me, I'm still ranting. On the rest of the menu, in an echo of the New Deal, President Biden and Congressional Democrats have proposed a civilian climate corps. Indeed, almost like the Conservation Corps. They're going to be cutting trails and other things to help the climate and America. I like it. Silicon Valley has discovered remote work is easier to begin than to end. Well, yeah, indeed. And an academic press outlined plans to reissue a corrected version of a wildly inaccurate accounting of World War I hero Sgt York by Trump insurrectionist Pennsylvania State Senator Doug Mastriano. I'll get it out. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the Brazilian Supreme Court's Chief Justice issued a sharp rebuttal to Bolsonaro after the right-wing leader vowed to no longer abide by some of the court's rulings. Wow, a little Trump mini-me. And the French broadcast regulator clipped a far-right commentator's wings before his presidential run. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of the chat room link across the page there near the bottom of the homepage at netrootsradio.com with the live player at the top of the page. There's a button right there. Go ahead, try it. Also, the schedule of shows for the week and beyond are all there as well. You can check it all out. But to the left of the chat room link near the bottom is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, your generosity helps us continue this powerhouse of resistance against, well, violent forces arrayed against the great experiment that we call America, the United States of. If you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink and send those funds our way, we put that in a big kitty that we put money in from our own wallets, by the way. And we stretch those dollars beyond compare. Even on the quantum level, we're that good. We have a lot of experience doing this. And that allows us to pay our bills, fly under the radar, continue this powerhouse of resistance, and fulfill our civic duties as the founders originally intended so many, many, many years ago. And your generosity is sorely needed. The bills keep increasing. I cannot tell you, every time I open them up, which usually comes in the form of an email, hey, Netroots Radio, you got to pay more again. Have a nice day. Thanks. But we pay our bills. We don't find a way not to. And your generosity has allowed us to continue, and we thank you really, truly, from the bottom of our hearts. This is a very serious matter, even though we seem quite jocular. Now, if you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so by going to @NetrootsRadio. Tom takes care of that and a hell of a whole lot more. Thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter @JusticePutnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime and get that linked up on Twitter. Sometimes not before showtime, but I try. And I also get it linked up on other social media platforms. And you know who they are, especially that weird one. Yeah, the one facing you from a book. Eek. Okay. Do that. So the show notes and links are very important because, well, that's truly where the real reportage is. Follow the show on Twitter @CookbookWest. And pick up podcasts. Please do. pick up podcasts. And review, rate, whatever it is along the way, because, that's what we should be telling you so we get pushed up in the search engines. But you can find those podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, wherever podcasts can be found, indeed. Okay. Oh, apparently I had heard that our TuneIn feed was not working not terribly long ago, and it had me a bit worried, but lately people have been saying that it's been working quite fine, so I don't know what to say. Refresh your browser, I suppose, but I haven't heard of anybody saying that it hasn't been working in a bit of time, but it was a bit of concern because, you always presume everything's just working like clockwork. Okay, let's tuck into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, by the way. And this comes out of the Associated Press by Matthew Daly. Inspired by the New Deal era Civilian Conservation Corps, President Joe Biden and Congressional Democrats are pushing for a modern counterpart, a civilian climate corps that would create hundreds of thousands of jobs, building trails, restoring streams, and helping prevent catastrophic wildfires. Building on Biden's oft-repeated comment that when he thinks of climate change, he thinks of jobs, the White House says the $10 billion program would address both priorities as young adults find work installing solar panels, planting trees, digging irrigation ditches, and boosting outdoor recreation. We must seize this opportunity to build a big, bold pathway to critical careers for a diverse generation of Americans ready to take on this existential crisis that we face, said Ali Zaida, Deputy White House Climate Advisor. Its national service meets family-supporting careers meets the moment. The effort comes as the White House and many Democrats are intensifying their focus on climate change after a series of devastating storms recently battered much of the nation, touring neighborhoods in New York and New Jersey this week that were devastated by flooding from the remnants of Hurricane Ida. Biden said climate change has become everybody's crisis. The threat is here. It is not getting any better, Biden said. The question is, can it get worse? Well, I would think so. The proposed climate corps was not included in a bipartisan infrastructure bill approved by the Senate, but it is a key part of an emerging $3.5 trillion package backed by Democrats, except for Joe Manchin, to help families and address climate change. A vote in the House on both bills could occur by the end of the month. Representative Joe Neguse, a Colorado Democrat who has co-sponsored a climate corps bill, said it's important to train the next generation of U.S. land managers, park rangers, and other stewards of our natural resources. And of course, the other side is going to say, well, why aren't they being trained to drill, baby? Continuing with Neguse's statement, the bold investment is a necessary response to the climate crisis and prioritizes the maintenance and upkeep of public lands, he said. Of course, the other side says, public lands, those are mine, and we're going to drill, baby. While the jobs should pay at least $15 an hour, those likely to join the climate corps are not doing it for the compensation, Neguse said. They know it's important to connect to nature and do important work for their state and the nation. Details are still being worked out, but Neguse and other Democrats say the program should pay a living wage while offering health care coverage and support for child care, housing, transportation, and education. You know, this is a very similar construct as joining the military. Why don't we give people a choice? Civilian Climate Corps or the military? Just saying. David Popp, a professor of public administration at Syracuse University, said a key distinction between the original CCC and the new climate contingent is that the U.S. economy is not in a depression. great or otherwise as it was during Roosevelt's presidency. While U.S. employers added just 500,000 jobs in August, the unemployment rate depressed slightly to 5.2% as the economy continues to recover from the coronavirus pandemic. Most of those being targeted for the new Climate Corps could find employment elsewhere, Pop said, noting a proliferation of help wanted signs at retail businesses across the nation. I don't know that an unemployed coal worker in West Virginia is going to move to Montana to take a minimum wage job to restore streams, he said. Well, I don't think the coal miner or coal worker is the target audience for this employment, Mr. Pop. On the other hand, some of his own students are highly motivated by the climate crisis and may want to spend a year or two in an outdoor job that helps address an existential threat to the planet, Pop said. You know, there's a lot of college students who take a year or two to work for free as interns. So please. Many young people are very passionate about the environment, and they may see this as an opportunity to do something about the environment and still get paid for it, he said. Republicans largely dismiss the Climate Corps as a do-gooder proposal because they have no empathy for the world, for you, do-gooder, and that would waste money and could even take away jobs from workers displaced by the pandemic and the push for so-called green jobs, because they'd much rather strip mine and destroy things than, try to help the earth and get paid for it. We don't need another FDR program, and the idea that this is going to help land management is a false idea, said Arkansas Representative Bruce Westerman, the top Republican on the House Natural Resources Committee. At a committee meeting last week, Representative Cliff Bentz, a repug from Oregon right here, called the proposed Climate Corps delusional. Why would we think people are going to suddenly jump at doing really, really hard, dirty, dangerous work because we offer them $15 an hour? It's not going to happen. Actually, prisoners get paid, I think, a bit less than that, and they jump at it. These anti-American repugs, they're not about helping America, they're about destroying it. Maybe their kids are so lazy that they wouldn't want to go out and work for $15 an hour. Out in the wilderness, having fun, getting in shape, making America a better place to live. In a widely circulated piece, the conservative Wall Street Journal editorial page said that Democrats, always the emphasis on rats, want to expand government in every corner of American life. It isn't enough to lecture Americans about the supposed perils of climate change. Now, they also want to tax you and other Americans to pay your children to spend years lecturing you. That's the Wall Street Journal for you. See, this is what happens when you don't punch the Nazis. Okay? See what happens? Now, Senator Ed Markey, a prominent supporter of the Climate Corps, said such criticism overlooks important benefits. The program will help communities recover from climate disasters such as Hurricane Ida and western wildfires, while creating good-paying jobs that can turn into clean economy careers. In the process, Markey continued, the Climate Corps will make the country a safer, healthier place that can compete in the global economy. As the West Coast fights fires and the East Coast fights storms and smoke, the Wall Street Journal editorial board fights strawmen, Markey said in a letter to the newspaper. Michael Leitke and Barbara Ortate of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Technology companies that led the charge into remote work as the pandemic unfurled are confronting a new challenge: how, when, and even whether they should bring long isolated employees back to offices that have been designed for teamwork. I thought this period of remote work would be the most challenging year and a half of my career, but it's not, said Brent Heider, the Chief People Officer for business software maker Salesforce, and it's roughly 65,000 employees worldwide. Getting everything started back up the way it needs to be is proving to be even more difficult. That transition has been complicated by the rapid spread of the Delta variant, which has scrambled the plans many tech companies had for bringing back most of their workers near or after Labor Day weekend. Microsoft has pushed those dates back to October, while Apple, Google, Facebook, Amazon, and a growing list of others have already decided to wait until next year. Given how they set the tone for remote work, tech companies' return to office policies will likely have ripple effects across other industries. Employers' next steps could redefine how and where people work, predicts Laura Boudreau, a Columbia University assistant economics professor who studies workplace issues. We have moved beyond the theme of remote work being a temporary thing, Boudreau says. The longer the pandemic is stretched on, the harder it has become to tell employees to come back to the office, particularly full-time. Because they typically revolve around digital and online products, most tech jobs are tailor-made for remote work, yet most major tech companies insist that their employees should be ready to work in the office 2 or 3 days each week after the pandemic is over. The main reason? Tech companies have long believed that employees clustered together in a physical space will swap ideas and spawn innovations that probably would not have happened in isolation. That's one reason tech titans have poured billions of dollars into corporate campuses, interspersed with alluring common areas meant to lure employees out of their cubicles and into casual collisions that turn into brainstorming sessions. But the concept of water cooler innovation may be overblown, says Christy Lake, Chief People Officer for business software maker Twilio. There is no data that supports that really happens in real life, and yet we all subscribe to it, Lake says. You can't put the genie back in the bottle and tell people, oh, you have to be back in the office or innovation won't happen. Twilio isn't bringing back most of its roughly 6,300 employees back to its offices until early next year at the earliest, and plans to allow most of them to figure how frequently they should come in. This hybrid approach, permitting employees to toggle between remote and in-office work, has been widely embraced in the technology industry, particularly among the largest companies with the biggest payrolls. Mark Scofaro of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grist Thursdays. The academic press that published a Pennsylvania state senator's book about World War I hero Sgt Alvin York has asked him to review a list of factual errors and sourcing issues in the book, and the press's director said it plans to publish a corrected version early next year. University of Press Kentucky director Ashley Runyon outlined plans for the potential corrections and revisions to Senator Doug Mastriano's book. In emails to the Associated Press and to another researcher looking into York's 1918 acts of heroism while fighting in France. Runyon said the press will allow the author the opportunity to respond to the sources in question before preparing our final list of errata and corrections for a new printing. The verified sources and other corrections will also be reviewed by an outside scholar for confirmation. She said the press does not typically ask for an outside review for reprints, but was adding this external layer of review to ensure the accuracy of any corrections in the reprint. Mastriano's opposition to pandemic mitigation efforts in Pennsylvania and support for Trump's efforts to overturn his election loss last year have made him a one-man force in state politics. He said he is considering running for Pennsylvania governor next year, when incumbent Democratic Governor Tom Wolf is term limited. Researchers have questioned Mastriano's claim that he located York's battle site with precision, identified erroneous footnotes, and raised doubts about a photo that appears on the book's cover. Mastriano claims the government photo shows York with prisoners from the famed battle, contradicting the military photographer's caption. The AP also identified sourcing errors in the book in a story published 6 months ago. York led a small group of badly outnumbered American soldiers behind German lines to disrupt machine gun fire in the woods of northern France during the waning weeks of the war. More than 20 German soldiers were killed, 132 captured, with York winning widespread fame and a Medal of Honor. Runyon said the University of Press of Kentucky sent Mastriano a list of about 30 queries, some confirming typos and others seeking sources to back up information on the book. He was asked to respond by the end of October. Well, let's get to our break. Well, he mulls over those corrections. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Shayla Farzan. Many plants and animals use temperature and other environmental cues like a calendar, letting them know when it's time to bloom or find a mate. But climate change is disrupting these natural rhythms worldwide, from songbird migration across North America to plankton growth cycles in Norway to a hillside of wildflowers in Missouri.
So if we head on out, you can notice there are a number of different species that have popped up. Dwarf-crested iris, blue phlox, Canadian woodbedony.
Matthew Austin is a postdoctoral researcher with the Living Earth Collaborative at Washington University. This patch of forest, about 40 miles west of St. Louis, is covered with native wildflowers throughout the spring and summer. But the timing of when they bloom has changed in recent decades, Austin says.
We see that a warming climate is not only causing flowers to bloom earlier, in many species it's also causing them to end flowering later.
Missouri wildflowers are blooming up to a week longer than they used to, compared to data collected in the 1930s and 40s. And that's created a late summer pileup of species flowering all at once. Meanwhile, bumblebees and other pollinators are flitting from species to species, says Nicole Miller-Strutman, a biologist at Webster University.
When a pollinator makes a decision about who it's going to visit, that influences the pollen that they're carrying on their body. And flowers, not too surprisingly, don't really want pollen from another plant species.
A flower that gets pollen from the wrong species may not be able to reproduce, or it could push some to self-pollinate, an extreme form of inbreeding. To understand how this might affect reproduction, Matthew Austin has been pollinating hundreds of Missouri wildflowers by hand this year. Some experimental flowers get pollen from their own species. Others get pollen from different plant species to simulate what's happening now, as climate change causes that pileup of species blooming at the same time. To keep pollinators from visiting his flowers, he slips sheer mesh bags over the buds before they open. But just as he removes the bag to tap pollen onto the flower's sticky stigma, a tiny bee lands on it.
And oh no. Well, a pollinator got on this one while I had it unbagged. They're sneaky. So, this will not be included in my study, but thankfully there's another one right here.
He moves on to the next flower, a human meticulously doing the work of a bee. It's a slow process, but Austin hopes the results will help us understand how climate change is reshaping this complicated ecosystem. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Shayla Farzan.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. It doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
Welcome to Abortion Vigilantism in Texas.
I'm Lily Ledbetter, and this is a Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
When a woman or girl is raped or is the victim of incest in Texas and becomes pregnant, she can't get an abortion because a Texas law, effective September 1st, prohibits any abortion after 6 weeks, a time when many women do not even know they're pregnant. No exceptions, not even for rape and incest. The law also makes it illegal for anyone to provide any kind of assistance to the woman considering an abortion. A father cannot counsel his daughter. A husband can't support his wife's decision, even after she was raped by a stranger. And then, the law allows any person, someone with absolutely no connection whatsoever to the person needing an abortion, to sue the woman and her dad, husband, sister, friend who gave her a ride to the clinic, and of course the abortion clinic itself, and receive a $10,000 award from them. $10,000! It's essentially a bounty program created by the state to hunt down women in need of medical care and those who would provide that care and support and help them. All this, notwithstanding the First Amendment's guarantee of freedom of speech and the constitutional guarantee of choice under Roe v. Wade, which this Texas law, as a practical matter, eviscerates in that state, which is, of course, its point. The legal challenges have begun.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1929. That was the day a mistrial was declared in the case of 16 textile mill unionists in North Carolina. The mistrial sparked 5 days of anti-union vigilante violence. Textile mill workers at Gastonia's Lorry Mill had been on strike since April 1st. They demanded higher wages and shorter work hours, union recognition, and an end to the hated stretch-out system. Soon, textile workers at Bessemer City's American Mill walked off the job in solidarity and joined the National Textile Workers Union. Ella Mae Wiggins was one of the strike leaders at American Mill. She was known for her militancy, but also for organizing black workers into the union. As the strike wore on, mill owners evicted dozens of families from company housing. Wiggins helped set up a tent city. On June 7th, sheriff's deputies attacked strikers who marched to Lorry Mill to call out remaining workers. The police arrived at the tent colony later that evening to disarm them, and Gastonia's police chief wound up dead. Immediately, more than 70 textile union members and leaders were rounded up and arrested. 16 stood trial for the murder of Chief Adderholt. The Anti-Union Committee of 100 smashed up the NTWU headquarters in Gastonia and Bessemer City. They kidnapped, beat, and threatened to kill several union members. The rampage continued as scab forces moved onto Charlotte to raid the offices of the International Labor Defense, who had handled the strikers' case. 5 days into the terror, Wiggins was killed on her way to a union solidarity rally. Outrage over her murder forced mill owners to improve conditions and wages, but the fight to organize would continue for years. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 63 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of only about 88 today, a mix of clouds and sun early, followed by cloudy skies this afternoon, and a stray shower or thunderstorm is possible, with winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, and considerable cloudiness overnight with occasional rain showers, lows in the low 60s, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, and we should be getting a little less than a quarter inch of rain out of this little dropping. Let's hope that it happens. Partly cloudy skies tomorrow. A stray shower or thunderstorm is possible. Highs in the low 80s. Winds light and variable. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon continue to spike. We now stand at 195,095 people confirmed with infections, with deceased again increasing, this time standing at 226. And yet they still deny it, and they still protest, and they still spread it like the bioterrorists they are. Ragweed pollen is rated as moderate right outside the window here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is unhealthy for sensitive groups at 113 parts per million, though right at this very moment it is still good, in the good range here in Rogue River at the mothership, but that could change in a moment's notice. The daytime UV index remains high at a fall level of 6. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.93 inches. Visibility is at 6 miles, and relative humidity is at 85%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. London is 72 and partly cloudy. Paris is 80 degrees and mostly cloudy. Rome is 84 and fair. Kyiv is 75 and fair. Kabul is 72 and clear. Hong Kong is 81 degrees and fair. Tokyo is 72 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 64 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 56 degrees and mostly cloudy. And New York is 72 degrees Fahrenheit with a heavy rain shower. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. Deborah Alvarez and Diane Gentet of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grist Thursdays. The Brazilian Supreme Court's Chief Justice issued a sharp rebuttal to President Jair Bolsonaro one day after the right-wing leader escalated his feud with the court by vowing to no longer abide by one of its justices' rulings. Encouraging non-compliance with court decisions is undemocratic, illicit, and intolerable, the Chief Justice said in a nationally televised message. He added that if Bolsonaro were to disobey a court ruling or someone else were to do so at his urging, it would constitute a crime. No one will close this court. We will keep it standing, he added. At demonstrations in support of Bolsonaro on Tuesday, many people displayed signs and banners railing against the Supreme Court, demanding it be dissolved, or that one justice in particular, Alexandre de Moraes, be removed. De Moraes is overseeing an investigation targeting Bolsonaro and two of his sons. Bolsonaro formally requested the justice's impeachment last month. Bolsonaro's approval ratings have slumped due to the government's woeful COVID-19 response and surging inflation, yet he remains far more popular than prior presidents who were impeached, and, as Tuesday proved, he is still capable of rallying his energetic following to the streets.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Reuters staff brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. France's broadcast regulator said a far-right commentator known for incendiary remarks on Islam, immigration, and French identity had signaled electoral ambitions and should be subject to limits on airtime for political figures. Eric Zemmour, a regular feature on billionaire Vincent Bollard's CNews cable network and widely credited with lifting his viewer numbers, has not officially thrown his hat into the 2022 presidential election race. However, he has said he wants to run, has quit his columnist job at Le Figaro, launched a website, and will soon publish his latest book, a rite of passage for would-be candidates. It is unusual for the watchdog to preempt a candidate's announcement. However, it said in a statement that in light of his actions and in line with national legislation, broadcasters should, from September 9th, count the interventions of Zemmour in the national political debate, meaning restrictions on airtime. A polarizing figure who has made a career of testing the limits of political correctness, Zemmour has popularity among staunch conservatives, reflecting a deep-rooted nationalist, anti-immigrant current in French politics. An establishment outsider, Zemmour would sit further still to the right of far-right leader Marine Le Pen. Polls show him winning only 7 to 8% of the first-round presidential vote. That would not be enough to pass into the second round, but by eroding the support to Le Pen, with security, national identity, and immigration set to dominate the campaign, he would make the contest more unpredictable, including for President Emmanuel Macron. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on and we'll meet up here tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte coère. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.